Grüß Gott, hallo. Ist wohl nicht zu Hause. Naja.
The rain had started as a whisper against the tall windows of the velvet room, but now it drummed with insistence, each drop a tiny percussion against the glass. Emily Carter barely noticed. Her feet ached, her lower back throbbed with that familiar burning sensation that came from standing for 10 hours straight, and her mind was already calculating whether her tips tonight would cover the overdue electric bill, or if she'd have to choose between that and groceries again. "Table 7 needs water," Marcus called from behind the bar, his voice cutting through the soft jazz that floated through the restaurant's main dining room. "And table 12 wants to see the dessert menu." Emily nodded, forcing her expression into something that resembled pleasant attentiveness. She'd perfected this mask over the past 3 years of waiting tables, the smile that never quite reached her eyes, the posture that suggested she was delighted to be there, the tone that made every customer feel like they were her only concern in the world. It was exhausting, this constant performance, but it paid the bills. Mostly. The Velvet Room sat in the heart of Manhattan's financial district, a place where power lunches stretched into power dinners, and the wine list cost more than Emily's monthly rent. She didn't belong here. Not really. The other servers had degrees from prestigious schools, spoke 3 languages, and saw this job as a stepping stone to something greater. Emily saw it as survival. She grabbed a pitcher of water and made her way to table 7, weaving between the closely packed tables with the practiced grace of someone who'd learned to navigate tight spaces without disturbing a single conversation. The restaurant was at capacity tonight. Friday evening always brought out the crowds, the men in $1,000 suits and women in designer dresses who barely glanced at the people serving them. "Your water, sir," Emily said, filling the glasses with steady hands. The man at table 7, 50s, graying temples, wedding ring that probably cost more than her car, didn't acknowledge her. He was too busy talking into his phone about quarterly projections and market volatility. Emily had learned not to take it personally. To people like him, she was practically invisible. As she turned away, she caught her reflection in one of the restaurant's many mirrors. 28 years old, and she looked older. The exhaustion showed in the shadows under her green eyes and the way her auburn hair, pulled back in a practical ponytail, had lost some of its shine. She'd been pretty once, or so people had told her. Now she just looked tired. The door to the kitchen swung open, and the head chef's assistant emerged with a tray of appetizers. Emily grabbed the dessert menus from the hostess stand and headed toward table 12, her mind already running through her evening routine. Finish her shift at 11, take the subway back to her studio in Queens, heat up whatever leftovers she'd managed to save from the restaurant, collapse into bed, wake up at 6 to do it all again. This was her life now. Small, contained, safe. It hadn't always been this way. 3 years ago she'd had dreams. Art school, a studio in Brooklyn, canvases filled with color and light. But dreams required money, and money required making choices she'd rather not think about. Her father's medical expenses had consumed everything. The treatments that didn't work, the second opinions that offered no hope, the funeral that left her with nothing but debt, and the kind of grief that sat heavy in her chest, making it hard to breathe on difficult days. "Emily, you've got a new table. Section 4, booth in the corner," Rachel, the hostess, said as Emily passed. "They just walked in. Look important." Emily glanced toward Section 4. A group of men were settling into the corner booth, the most private table in the restaurant, the one usually reserved weeks in advance for VIP clients. There were 5 of them, and even from across the room, Emily could sense something different about them. They moved with a kind of controlled precision, their eyes constantly scanning the space, their body language suggesting they were more alert than relaxed. The man at the center of the group caught her attention first. Mid-30s, dark hair styled with deliberate casualness, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him so perfectly it had to be custom-made. But it wasn't the expensive clothes that made Emily's instincts prickle. It was the way he carried himself. There was an authority in his posture, a quiet command that made the other men defer to him without words. "I'll take it," Emily said, straightening her apron. Tips from important clients were usually good, and she needed every dollar she could get. She approached the table with her practiced smile, notepad ready. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the Velvet Room. Can I start you off with something to drink?" The man in the center looked up at her, and Emily found herself meeting eyes so dark they were almost black. They were intelligent eyes, calculating, taking in everything about her in a single sweep, not in the way some men looked at her with unwanted interest. but with the kind of assessment someone might give a chess piece they were deciding how to use. "Bring us a bottle of the Brunello 2015, he said. His voice was smooth, controlled, with the faintest trace of a New York accent. "And water for the table." "Excellent choice," Emily replied, jotting it down. "I'll have that right out for you. Have you had a chance to look at the menu, or would you like a few minutes?" "We'll need a few minutes," one of the other men said, older than the others, maybe 50, with silver hair and a scar that traced along his jawline. His eyes were harder than the others, more suspicious. "And we'd like privacy while we talk." "Of course," Emily said smoothly. "I'll bring your wine and water, and I'll check back in 10 minutes. As she walked away, she felt their eyes on her back, particularly the intense gaze of the man in the center. She'd learned to identify the types over her years of serving. The ones who saw her as prey, the ones who didn't see her at all, the ones who treated her with basic respect. This group was different. They watched everything, noticed everything, and there was a tension among them that suggested this wasn't a social dinner. Emily retrieved the wine from the cellar, going through the familiar motions of selecting the right bottle, checking the vintage, placing it in an ice bucket. Marcus raised an eyebrow as she passed the bar. "That's a $300 bottle," he said. "Your corner booth must be somebody." "They look like business types," Emily replied, though she wasn't entirely sure that was accurate. There was something about them that didn't quite fit the usual corporate crowd. She returned to table 4 with the wine and water, setting everything down with practiced efficiency. The men had been talking in low voices, but they fell silent as she approached. The tension was palpable now, thick enough that Emily could feel it prickling against her skin. "Your Brunello," she said, showing the label to the man in the center. Protocol dictated she present it to whoever ordered. "Would you like to taste it?" He nodded once, and Emily went through the ritual of opening the bottle, pouring a small amount into his glass, waiting while he swirled, sniffed, and tasted. He nodded again, and she filled the glasses for the other men, moving around the table with careful precision. That's when she noticed the man sitting directly across from the one who'd ordered. Younger, nervous, his hands fidgeting with his napkin. He kept glancing at the windows, at the door, anywhere but at the men he was sitting with. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the restaurant's comfortable temperature. Something wasn't right. Emily had learned to read people in this job. You had to know when to be chatty and when to be scarce, when to push the expensive specials and when to let people order in peace. This young man was afraid, terrified actually, and the others knew it. "Are you ready to order, or would you like more time?" Emily asked, keeping her voice neutral. "More time," the man in the center said, his attention shifting to the nervous young man across from him. "We're still discussing some business matters." Emily nodded and retreated, but something made her linger near the bar, watching the table from the corner of her eye. The conversation at the booth had resumed, but the body language was all wrong. The man in the center leaned forward slightly, his posture deceptively relaxed but his focus laser-sharp on the nervous young man. The others around the table had shifted, creating a barrier of sorts. This wasn't a business dinner. This was a confrontation. "You're staring," Marcus said quietly, polishing a wine glass. "Everything okay?" "I don't know," Emily murmured. "Something feels off." "Not our problem," Marcus replied, his tone gentle but firm. "We serve the food, collect the tips, go home. That's the job." He was right, of course. Emily had learned years ago not to get involved in other people's drama. She had enough of her own to manage. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. 10 minutes passed. Emily approached the table again, notepad ready. "Are you gentlemen ready to order?" The man in the center smiled, a controlled expression that didn't reach his eyes. "The lady will have the filet, medium rare. I'll have the same. Gentlemen?" He looked around the table and the others ordered quickly, efficiently, all except the nervous young man, who stammered through his order, his voice shaking slightly. Emily wrote everything down, repeated it back for confirmation, and headed toward the kitchen. As she pushed through the swinging door, she heard raised voices from the booth, not loud enough to disturb other diners, but urgent enough to make her pause. "We need to talk about this," one of the men was saying. "There's nothing to talk about," came the smooth reply from the man in the center. "You made a choice. Now you deal with the consequences." The nervous young man said something Emily couldn't quite hear, but the fear in his voice was unmistakable. She submitted the order to the kitchen and tried to focus on her other tables, but her attention kept drifting back to the corner booth. The dynamic there had shifted. The nervous young man had gone pale, his hands trembling as he reached for his wine glass. The others had closed in somehow, their postures suggesting they weren't going to let him leave easily. Emily delivered orders to tables 9 and 11, refilled water glasses, recommended desserts, all while that knot of unease in her stomach grew tighter. She'd seen enough in her 28 years to know when a situation was dangerous. This qualified. The kitchen rang the bell. The orders for table 4 were ready. Emily loaded the plates onto her tray, balancing them with the skill of someone who'd done this thousands of times, and headed back toward the corner booth. That's when everything changed. As Emily approached the table, her eyes swept across the restaurant out of habit, checking if anyone needed anything, monitoring the flow of service. The rain was coming down harder now, streams of water running down the tall windows blurring the view of the street outside. The lighting in the restaurant was dim, romantic, with small candles flickering on each table. And there, on the chest of the man in the center, the one who'd ordered the wine, the one who radiated authority and command, was a small red dot. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She knew what that was. Everyone knew what that was. She'd seen it in movies, on television, in the news reports that showed crime scenes and investigations. A laser sight, a targeting device. Someone, somewhere outside this restaurant, had a weapon aimed directly at that man's chest. Time seemed to slow down. Emily's mind raced through possibilities. Should she scream? Alert security? Drop the tray and run? But all those options would take too long. That red dot was steady now, centered perfectly over his heart. Whoever was out there was about to pull the trigger. The man hadn't noticed. None of them had. They were too focused on their conversation, on the nervous young man who was now talking rapidly, desperately, trying to explain something. Emily had maybe 2 seconds to make a decision. Her body moved before her conscious mind caught up. She lunged forward, the tray tilting dangerously in her hands, and accidentally stumbled, sending hot food and wine cascading directly onto the man's lap. He jerked backward with a sharp curse, standing up abruptly, and in that instant, that precise fraction of a second when he moved, the window behind him shattered. The sound was deafening. Glass exploded inward in a shower of glittering shards. People screamed. The carefully maintained ambiance of the velvet room erupted into chaos. Emily hit the ground hard, her ears ringing, her heart hammering so violently she thought it might break through her ribs. Around her, people were diving under tables, scrambling for cover. Someone was yelling about getting down, staying low. Strong hands grabbed her arm, yanking her sideways. She found herself being pulled behind the relative cover of the booth, pressed against the wall by bodies that had suddenly formed a protective barrier. Her face was inches from the floor, and she could see broken glass glittering like diamonds against the dark wood. "Don't move," a voice hissed in her ear, one of the men from the table. "Stay down." Emily couldn't have moved if she wanted to. Her muscles had locked, her body frozen in the grip of adrenaline and shock. She could hear shouting, the sound of chairs scraping, running footsteps. Someone was on a phone, barking orders. The restaurant's background music still played incongruously, smooth jazz accompanying absolute pandemonium. Gradually, the chaos began to organize itself. Restaurant security appeared, cordoning off the area around the broken window. Managers rushed between tables, checking on customers, trying to restore some semblance of order. In the distance, sirens wailed, getting closer. "Are you hurt?" The voice came from above her now, calm and controlled despite everything that had just happened. Emily looked up to find the man from the center of the booth crouching beside her. His suit was ruined, covered in wine and sauce, but his dark eyes were completely focused on her, sharp and assessing. I don't think so," Emily managed, her voice coming out shakier than she would have liked. She checked herself quickly. No blood, no pain beyond the jarring impact of hitting the floor. "I'm okay. What's your name?" he asked. "Emily. Emily Carter. Emily." He said it slowly, as if testing the weight of it. Then his hand extended toward her, and she found herself being helped to her feet with surprising gentleness. That was quite a stumble. There was something in the way he said it, a knowing quality that made Emily's breath catch again. He knew. Somehow he knew it hadn't been an accident. "I'm so sorry about your meal," Emily said automatically, falling back on her server training because she didn't know what else to do. "And your suit. I don't know what happened, You saved my life," he interrupted quietly, his voice low enough that only she could hear it over the surrounding commotion. "That's what happened." Emily met his eyes and saw the truth there. He'd put it together. The stumble, the timing, the bullet that had passed through the space where he'd been sitting just moments before, and now he was looking at her with an intensity that made her feel suddenly, acutely visible in a way she hadn't been in years. "I don't understand what's happening," Emily whispered, which was true. Her mind was still catching up to the fact that someone had just tried to hurt another person right in front of her, that she'd somehow prevented it, that her ordinary Friday night had just been shattered as thoroughly as that window. "I know you don't," he replied. Around them, his men had formed a loose circle, creating a barrier between their group and the rest of the restaurant. The older man with the scar was speaking urgently into a phone. The nervous young man from earlier had disappeared entirely. Emily hadn't even seen him leave. Authorities began flooding into the restaurant. First the regular officers, then others in suits who moved with purpose and authority. They began interviewing witnesses, taking statements, securing the scene. The restaurant manager was nearly in tears, apologizing profusely to everyone while trying to coordinate with the investigators. Emily stood frozen in the middle of it all, still not quite believing this was real. Part of her kept waiting to wake up, to find herself at home in bed. This whole thing just a stress-induced nightmare. "Ms. Carter," an investigator approached her, badge out. "I understand you were serving the table when the incident occurred. I'm going to need to get a statement from you." "Of course," Emily said numbly. "I'll tell you whatever you need to know." But before the investigator could ask his first question, the man from the booth stepped forward. "Officer, I'd like to request that Ms. Carter be allowed to give her statement at a later time. She's clearly in shock, and I think she needs medical attention first." "I'm fine," Emily protested automatically. "You're shaking," he observed, and Emily looked down to find he was right. Her hands were trembling uncontrollably, "and you hit the ground pretty hard. I insist on having a medical professional check you out." There was something in his tone, not quite a command, but carrying an expectation of compliance that made the investigator pause and reassess. Emily saw the man slip something to the officer, a business card, she thought, and watched as the officer's expression shifted from routine professionalism to something more deferential. "Mr. Moretti," the officer said, his tone respectful now. "Of course, we can arrange for Ms. Carter to come in tomorrow to give her statement, but we will need to speak with her." "Naturally," the man, Moretti, replied smoothly. "She'll be available whenever you need her. You have my word." The officer nodded and moved away to continue his investigation. Emily found herself being guided toward the restaurant's back entrance by two of Moretti's men, with Moretti himself walking beside her. "Wait," Emily said, finding her voice. "My shift isn't over. I need to—" "Your shift is definitely over," Moretti said, a hint of dark humor in his voice. "The restaurant is a scene now. Nobody's working tonight." He paused, studying her face. "Where do you live?" "Queens," Emily answered automatically, then wondered why she was telling him. "I can take the subway, I'll be fine." "You're not taking the subway," Moretti said firmly. "Vincent will drive you home." The older man with the scar, Vincent apparently, nodded once. "Car's waiting." "I don't need—" Emily started to protest, but Moretti cut her off with a look. "Emily," he said, and there was something almost gentle in the way he said her name. "Someone just tried to hurt me in a room full of witnesses. They failed because of you. Do you understand what that means?" Emily shook her head slowly, though a cold dread was starting to seep into her bones. "It means you're now part of this whether you want to be or not," Moretti continued. His hand touched her shoulder briefly, a light contact but one that made her hyper-aware of his presence. "It means the people who planned this might view you as a problem. It means your life just got complicated. I just spilled some food," Emily whispered, though they both knew it was a lie. "You saw the targeting site," Moretti said quietly. "You recognized what it was. You acted without hesitation, without thinking about your own safety. That kind of awareness, that kind of reflexive heroism, it's rare, and it saved my life." He paused, then added with quiet intensity, "I don't forget debts like that." A black car pulled up to the back entrance, expensive, sleek, windows tinted dark. Vincent held the door open and Emily found herself being ushered inside before she could formulate another protest. Moretti leaned down, his hand resting on the car's roof, his dark eyes holding hers. "Vincent will make sure you get home safely. Tomorrow someone will come by to check on you and coordinate your statement with the authorities. After that," he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "After that, we'll talk about what happens next." "What happens next?" Emily echoed, confusion and fear warring in her voice. You saved my life, Emily Carter, Moretti said, and there was something almost like a promise in his tone, though whether it was a promise of protection or something else entirely, Emily couldn't tell. That changes everything. The door closed and the car pulled away from the restaurant. Emily twisted in her seat to look back through the rear window. The last thing she saw was Ryan Moretti standing in the rain, watching her leave, surrounded by his men and the flashing lights of emergency vehicles. Her hands were still shaking. The adrenaline was starting to wear off now, leaving her feeling hollow and exhausted and completely overwhelmed. She didn't understand what had just happened. Not really. She didn't understand who Ryan Moretti was or why someone had wanted to hurt him, or what it meant that she'd prevented it. But as the car carried her through the rain-slicked streets of Manhattan toward her small studio in Queens, one thing had become terribly, undeniably clear. Her small, contained, safe life, the one she'd built so carefully out of the ruins of her dreams, had just been shattered as completely as that restaurant window, and there was no going back. Emily didn't sleep that night. She sat in her studio apartment still wearing her wine-stained uniform, watching the numbers on her digital clock change with agonizing slowness. 2:47. AM became 2:48, then 2:49. Outside her window, Queens was mostly quiet except for the occasional siren in the distance and the rumble of late-night traffic on the expressway. Her hands had finally stopped shaking around midnight, but her mind wouldn't stop replaying those few seconds. The red dot, the decision to move, the sound of shattering glass. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it again. That small point of light trembling on Ryan Moretti's chest, steady and precise and promising something terrible. She'd Googled his name on her phone during the car ride home. The results had made her stomach drop. Ryan Moretti, 34 years old, CEO of Moretti Enterprises, a company with interests in construction, real estate development, and import-export. Born and raised in Brooklyn. His father, Alessandro Moretti, had been a prominent businessman who'd passed away 10 years ago, under circumstances the articles described as controversial. His older brother Marcus had been gone for 7 years. An accident, the official report said, though the news stories hinted at other possibilities. On paper, Ryan Moretti was a legitimate businessman, but the way the articles were written, the carefully neutral language they used, the things they didn't quite say, it all painted a picture of someone who operated in spaces where official titles and legal businesses were just the surface of something much deeper and more complicated. Emily had spent 3 years perfecting the art of not getting involved in other people's problems. She'd learned to keep her head down, do her job, collect her paycheck, and go home. The world was full of complicated situations that weren't her responsibility to fix or understand, but she'd gotten involved anyway. She'd seen that red dot and moved without thinking, and now, according to Ryan Moretti himself, she was part of this. What did that even mean? The knock on her door came at 9:17 a.m., just as Emily was forcing herself to eat a piece of toast she didn't want. She'd finally changed out of her uniform, showering away the wine and the fear sweat and the lingering smell of expensive Italian food. Now she wore jeans and an old college sweatshirt, her hair still damp, dark circles under her eyes that even concealer couldn't hide. She approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. A woman stood in the hallway, early 30s, professional attire, dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She held a briefcase and wore an expression of patient waiting. "Ms. Carter," the woman called. "My name is Diana Rossi. Mr. Moretti sent me to check on you and to discuss some matters regarding last night's incident." Emily opened the door but kept the chain lock engaged, creating a gap of only a few inches. "How do you know where I live? The restaurant has your address on file for your employment records," Diana replied smoothly. "May I come in? I promise this won't take long." Every instinct Emily had developed over years of city living told her not to let a stranger into her apartment. But Diana Rossi didn't look threatening. She looked like a lawyer or an accountant, someone who solved problems with paperwork rather than force. Emily unhooked the chain and opened the door, and Diana stepped inside, her eyes making a quick, assessing sweep of the small studio. The unmade Murphy bed still pulled down from the wall, the kitchenette with its mismatched dishes, the single window with its view of the building across the alley. It wasn't much, but it was clean, and it was Emily's. "Thank you," Diana said, setting her briefcase on the small table that served as Emily's dining area, desk, and craft space. "First, how are you feeling? Any injuries from last night?" "I'm fine," Emily said automatically. "Just shaken up. Understandable." Diana opened her briefcase and pulled out a tablet. I need to inform you that investigators will want to speak with you sometime today. They'll call to arrange a time. When they do, you'll need to go downtown to give your statement. Okay, Emily said slowly. Is that what you came here to tell me? Partially. Diana's fingers moved across the tablet screen. I'm also here to discuss some practical matters. Your place of employment is currently closed pending investigation. The restaurant owner isn't sure when they'll be able to reopen. There's significant damage to repair, and there are legal considerations. You won't be able to work there for at least the next several weeks. The words hit Emily like a physical blow. Several weeks? I can't. I have rent due in 2 weeks. I have bills. I need to work. Mr. Moretti anticipated this concern, Diana said calmly. She reached into her briefcase again and pulled out an envelope. This is compensation for your lost wages during the closure period, plus additional funds to cover any expenses you might incur. Consider it a thank you for your quick thinking last night. Emily stared at the envelope Diana held out to her. I don't want his money. Ms. Carter, be practical. You need to survive. This isn't charity. It's acknowledgement of a debt. Diana set the envelope on the table between them. You prevented something terrible from happening. The least Mr. Moretti can do is ensure you don't suffer financially because of it. Emily's hands clenched at her sides. Everything about this felt wrong. The money, this polished woman in her apartment, the way her life was being rearranged by forces she didn't understand. I just want things to go back to normal. That's not possible, Diana said, and there was something almost sympathetic in her tone. Not immediately anyway. The people who planned what happened last night, they're still out there. They're going to be looking for information about what went wrong with their plan. Your name is going to come up in investigation reports. They're going to know you were involved. Fear crystallized in Emily's chest. Are you saying I'm in danger? I'm saying the situation is complicated, Diana replied carefully. Mr. Moretti takes his obligations seriously. He wants to ensure your safety while things settle down. That means some precautions need to be taken. What kind of precautions? Diana pulled up something on her tablet and turned it to show Emily. It was a building. Modern, secure-looking, in what appeared to be a nice neighborhood. Mr. Moretti has arranged temporary housing for you in Manhattan. It's a secure building with 24-hour security doorman, cameras. You'd be much safer there than here. Emily looked around her studio apartment. Her space, her sanctuary, the place she'd rebuilt her life after everything fell apart. It wasn't much, but it was hers. I'm not leaving my home. Ms. Carter? Emily. And I said no. She crossed her arms, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. I appreciate the concern, but I'm not going into hiding because something happened at my job. I didn't do anything wrong. Diana studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I understand. But will you at least accept enhanced security? Someone to keep an eye on your building, make sure nothing unusual happens? You mean surveillance? Emily said flatly. I mean protection, Diana corrected. There's a difference. Emily wanted to refuse that too. Wanted to maintain the independence she'd fought so hard to establish. But she wasn't stupid. Someone had tried to hurt Ryan Moretti in a crowded restaurant, showing a level of boldness that suggested they were either desperate or confident. If they found out she'd interfered, fine, Emily said reluctantly. But I want to be clear. I'm not part of whatever Mr. Moretti is involved in. I spilled some food and got lucky with my timing. That's all. Diana's expression suggested she didn't believe that any more than Emily did, but she simply nodded. Of course. Now, about your statement to the investigators. They spent the next 20 minutes going over what Emily should and shouldn't say. Diana's advice was simple. Tell the truth, but only what was directly asked. Yes, she'd been serving the table. Yes, she'd accidentally stumbled and spilled the order. Yes, she'd seen the window break and heard people screaming. No, she didn't know anything about the individuals at the table beyond their dinner orders. Don't speculate, Diana emphasized. Don't offer theories. Just answer the questions you're asked. After Diana left, Emily sat alone in her apartment, staring at the envelope of money on her table. She didn't want to open it. Opening it felt like accepting something she couldn't take back, like crossing a line she couldn't uncross. But her rent was due in 12 days, and her bank account had barely enough to cover it even before this happened. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. She opened the envelope. The amount inside made her gasp. It was enough to cover 3 months of rent, with plenty left over for bills and groceries and even some savings. It was more money than she'd seen in one place since before her father got sick. Emily's hands trembled as she put the cash back in the envelope and hid it in the freezer, an old trick she'd learned from her mother. Her emotions were a tangled mess she couldn't begin to unpack. Gratitude warred with resentment, relief with fear, and underneath it all was a growing sense that her life had fundamentally changed in ways she was only beginning to understand. The call from investigators came at 2:30 p.m. They were polite but firm. They needed her statement today. Could she come downtown at 4 p.m.? Emily agreed, then spent an hour getting ready with the same care she'd take for a job interview. Professional clothes, minimal makeup, hair neat. She wanted to look responsible, trustworthy, like someone who genuinely just had bad timing with a dinner tray. The police station was exactly as unwelcoming as she'd expected. Fluorescent lights, hard chairs, the smell of bad coffee and old paperwork. Emily sat in an interview room across from two investigators who introduced themselves with names she immediately forgot. Too nervous to retain the information, they asked their questions. Emily answered them, following Diana's advice to stick to simple facts. Yes, she'd been working. Yes, she'd been serving that particular table. No, she'd never seen any of those men before last night. Yes, she'd stumbled. She'd been on her feet for hours. She was tired. Accidents happened. You have remarkably good reflexes, one investigator observed. To stumble at the exact moment someone fired through that window. I guess I got lucky, Emily replied, keeping her voice steady. If I'd fallen a second later, I might have been hurt too. They couldn't argue with that. After an hour of questions that circled around the same basic facts, they finally let her go. As Emily was leaving, one of the investigators called after her. Miss Carter, be careful. The people Mr. Moretti associates with, they're not the kind you want to get involved with. Emily turned back. I'm not involved with anyone. I just work at a restaurant. Worked? The investigator corrected gently. Past tense. That restaurant's going to be closed for a while. Might be a good time to find employment somewhere else, somewhere safer. The implication was clear. Distance yourself from this situation while you still can. Emily left the police station with those words echoing in her mind. The evening air was cool, autumn settling into the city with its promise of shorter days and colder nights. She stood on the sidewalk, trying to decide whether to take the subway home or walk for a while to clear her head. The decision was made for her when a familiar black car pulled up to the curb. Vincent, the older man with the scar from last night, rolled down the passenger window. Get in, Ms. Carter. Mr. Moretti would like to speak with you. I gave my statement to the investigators, Emily said, staying on the sidewalk. I don't have anything else to say. This isn't about the statement, please. Vincent's tone was respectful but firm. It's important. Emily hesitated. She could refuse, could turn and walk away and hope that would be the end of it. But deep down, she knew it wouldn't be. Whatever had started last night wasn't finished. She got in the car. They drove through Manhattan as the sun set, painting the buildings in shades of gold and amber. Vincent didn't make conversation, and Emily was grateful for the silence. She watched the city pass by the windows, trying to calm her racing heart. The car pulled into an underground parking garage beneath a building that looked like luxury condominiums. Vincent led her to a private elevator that required a key card to operate. They rose smoothly upward, past floor after floor, until they reached the penthouse level. The elevator doors opened directly into an apartment that took Emily's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Central Park and the Manhattan skyline. The furnishings were modern and expensive, all clean lines and quality materials, but there was something impersonal about the space, as if no one actually lived here. Ryan Moretti stood by the windows, his back to her, looking out over the city. He'd changed since last night, now wearing dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Even in casual clothing, he projected that same sense of controlled authority. Thank you, Vincent, he said without turning around. That will be all. Vincent nodded to Emily and left. The elevator doors closed and Emily was alone with Ryan Moretti in his penthouse apartment, 40 stories above the city, with nowhere to run even if she wanted to. How did your statement go? Ryan asked, finally turning to face her. Fine. I told them what happened. Emily stayed near the elevator, maintaining distance. Look, I appreciate the money and the concern for my safety, but I don't want to be involved in whatever this is. I know you don't, Ryan replied. He moved to a bar cart and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid, whiskey probably, from a bottle that looked older than Emily. He offered her one, but she shook her head. He shrugged and took a sip from his own glass. Unfortunately, wanting something and getting it are two different things. The investigator told me to stay away from you, Emily said bluntly. He said you're dangerous. He's not wrong, Ryan said with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. I am dangerous. I've had to be. The world I operate in doesn't reward gentleness or mercy. Then why am I here? Emily demanded, frustration overriding her fear. If you're so dangerous, if I should stay away, then let me go. Forget I exist. I can't do that. Ryan set his glass down and approached her slowly, like someone approaching a skittish animal. Do you understand what happened last night? Truly understand it? Someone tried to hurt you, Emily said. I prevented it. End of story. Someone tried to take me out during a business meeting, Ryan corrected. In a public place with witnesses, with my own people around me. That takes planning, resources, and most importantly, information. Someone on my team gave up my location, my schedule, my security arrangements. Emily's mouth went dry. You mean someone you trust betrayed you? Exactly. Ryan's dark eyes held hers. And now I need to find out who, before they try again. Which means everyone close to me is under suspicion. Everyone except you. Me. Emily's voice came out higher than intended. You don't know anything about me. I know you had no reason to help me, Ryan said quietly. I know you risked your own safety without hesitation. I know you're not part of my world, which means you're not part of anyone else's world either. You're clean, uncomplicated. He paused, then added, and you're smart. You saw that targeting site from across the room in dim lighting. You recognized what it meant and acted in seconds. That kind of awareness is rare. Emily's back was literally against the wall. She'd retreated until the elevator doors stopped her. What do you want from me? I want you to trust me, Ryan said. I know that's asking a lot. But the people who planned last night's incident, they're going to figure out what went wrong. They're going to review security footage, interview witnesses, connect dots. Your name is going to come up, and when it does, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Emily could imagine it well enough. So what happens now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan was quiet for a long moment, studying her face as if trying to read her thoughts. Then he said, now you have a choice to make. You can go back to your apartment in Queens, hope for the best, and pray that nobody decides you're a liability worth eliminating. Or you accept my protection. Real protection, not just a security guard watching your building. You stay somewhere safe, somewhere I can guarantee no one will reach you, just until we sort out who the traitor is and eliminate the threat. You mean hide, Emily said flatly. I mean survive, Ryan corrected. There's no shame in that. Emily closed her eyes, trying to think through the exhaustion and fear. This couldn't be her life. 24 hours ago, her biggest concern was whether her tips would cover her electric bill. Now she was standing in a penthouse apartment, being offered protection from threats she'd only just learned existed, by a man who admitted he was dangerous. How long? She finally asked. I don't know, Ryan admitted. Could be days, could be weeks. I have people working on it, investigating, asking questions, applying pressure in the right places. But these things take time. And what would I do while I'm in hiding? Just sit in some secure apartment going crazy? You could work for me, Ryan said. The suggestion seemed to surprise him almost as much as it surprised Emily. I have legitimate businesses, restaurants, properties, import companies. You could handle administrative work, accounting, scheduling, something to keep you busy and give you purpose. I don't know anything about those things, Emily protested. You're smart. You'd learn. Ryan's expression softened slightly. Look, Emily, I'm not trying to trap you or control your life. I'm trying to keep you alive. You saved me. That means something. In my world, debts like that matter. They're sacred. I can't let something happen to you because you helped me. There was sincerity in his voice that Emily hadn't expected. This wasn't a manipulation or a power play. Ryan Moretti genuinely believed she was in danger, and he genuinely wanted to prevent that. What if I say no? Emily asked. What if I just want to go home and pretend none of this happened? Then I'll respect that choice, Ryan said quietly. But I'll also have Vincent follow you everywhere you go, and I'll station people outside your building 24/7, and I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe whether you want me to or not. Because that's what honor demands. Emily almost laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. You're basically giving me a choice between hiding in a nice apartment or being constantly followed. I'm giving you a choice between accepting help and making this harder on both of us, Ryan corrected. He extended his hand toward her. What do you say, Emily Carter? Will you trust me? Just for a little while? Emily looked at his outstretched hand, then up at his face. He was dangerous. The investigator had been right about that, but he was also, in his own way, trying to do the right thing. And the alternative, going back to her small apartment and hoping nobody decided she knew too much, suddenly seemed far more frightening than accepting help from a man who at least admitted what he was. She took his hand. His grip was firm, but not crushing, his palm warm against hers. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll accept your help, but I want rules. I want boundaries. And I want your word that when this is over, I can go back to my life." "You have my word," Ryan said solemnly. "When this is over, you're free to go. No obligations, no strings attached. Except the debt you keep talking about," Emily pointed out. Ryan smiled. A real smile this time, one that transformed his face from intimidating to almost handsome. "Except that. But don't worry, I'm a patient man. I can wait as long as it takes to repay that particular obligation." Emily wasn't sure what he meant by that, and she wasn't sure she wanted to know. She pulled her hand back, creating distance again. "When would I need to move?" "Tonight, if possible. Tomorrow at the latest. We'll collect anything you need from your apartment. Clothes, personal items, whatever makes you comfortable. The rest can stay there. Your rent will be paid on time, your utilities maintained. When this is over, everything will be exactly as you left it." It was all happening so fast. Emily's life, which had been so carefully controlled and predictable, was being swept up in a current she couldn't fight. But maybe that was okay. Maybe it was time to stop fighting the current and see where it took her. "All right," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "Let's do this." Ryan nodded, something like respect crossing his features. He moved to a nearby table and picked up a phone, pressing a single button. "Vincent, we're ready. Prepare the guest suite and arrange transportation back to Ms. Carter's apartment so she can collect her things." As he made arrangements, Emily walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out over Central Park. The sun had fully set now, and the city blazed with artificial light, millions of points of brightness against the darkness. Somewhere out there, people were having normal Friday nights, going to movies, eating dinner with friends, worrying about normal things. Emily's normal life was over, at least for now. In its place was something uncertain and frightening, and if she was being honest with herself, almost exciting in a terrifying way. She'd saved Ryan Moretti's life. Now he was going to try to save hers. Emily just hoped they both survived the process. 3 weeks. Emily had been living in Ryan Moretti's world for 3 weeks, and she still wasn't sure if she'd made the right choice. The guest suite turned out to be a 2-bedroom apartment on the 38th floor of the same building as Ryan's penthouse. Modern, spacious, with views that made her old studio in Queens look like a closet. Everything was provided: furniture, linens, a fully stocked kitchen, even fresh flowers that someone replaced twice a week. It was beautiful and comfortable, and felt absolutely nothing like home. Emily stood at the window on a gray November morning, watching clouds roll across the Manhattan skyline. The weather had turned cold over the past few days, that bitter kind of chill that warned winter was coming whether you were ready or not. Down below, people rushed along the sidewalks, bundled in coats and scarves, living their normal lives while Emily existed in this strange bubble of luxury and uncertainty. Her phone buzzed. A message from Diana Rossi. "Meeting at 10 a.m., Conference Room B. Bring the quarterly reports you've been reviewing." Right. Work. Because apparently, hiding from potential threats meant spending 8 hours a day learning the intricacies of Moretti Enterprises' legitimate business operations. To her surprise, Emily had discovered she was actually good at it. The administrative work came naturally: organizing schedules, reviewing contracts, identifying discrepancies in financial reports. Ryan had been right when he said she'd learn quickly. What he hadn't mentioned was how much of his business empire operated in that gray area between legal and questionable, where everything looked legitimate on paper, but felt weighted with unspoken implications. She'd learned not to ask too many questions. When a shipment manifest didn't quite match the customs documentation, she noted the discrepancy, but didn't investigate why. When certain clients received preferential treatment that made no business sense, she processed the paperwork without comment. This was the price of her protection: seeing things she wasn't supposed to see, and pretending she didn't understand what they meant. Emily dressed carefully for the meeting: a navy blazer over a white blouse, tailored pants, low heels. Diana had taken her shopping during the first week, insisting that if Emily was going to work for Moretti Enterprises, she needed to look the part. The clothes were nicer than anything Emily had owned before, and she still felt slightly like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. The conference room on the 40th floor was already occupied when Emily arrived. Diana sat at the head of the table, tablet open, reviewing something with her usual focused intensity. Vincent was there too, looking uncomfortable in formal business attire. He was clearly more at ease in the security role he usually played, and Ryan, of course, standing by the windows with his back to the room, talking quietly into his phone. "Morning," Emily said, taking a seat and pulling out the report she'd spent the past 2 days analyzing. "I found some interesting patterns in the third quarter numbers." "Interesting how?" Diana asked, immediately attentive. "The construction division shows consistent cost overruns on 3 specific projects, all in Brooklyn, all using the same subcontractors. But the final invoices don't reflect actual work completed based on the inspection reports." Emily pulled up her notes. Either someone's padding the invoices or the inspection reports are inaccurate. Diana and Vincent exchanged a look that Emily had learned to recognize, the one that meant she'd stumbled onto something significant that they couldn't directly explain. "Good catch," Diana said carefully. "I'll look into it." Ryan ended his phone call and turned around. He looked tired, Emily noticed, shadows under his eyes suggesting he wasn't sleeping well. Over the past 3 weeks, she'd learned to read his moods through subtle cues. The tension in his shoulders right now meant something was bothering him. "Emily," he said, acknowledging her presence with a slight nod. "How are you settling in?" It was a question he asked regularly, as if genuinely concerned about her well-being. Emily still wasn't sure what to make of that. "Fine," she replied. "The apartment is comfortable. I'm getting used to the work." "Just fine?" Ryan's dark eyes studied her face. "You look restless." Emily hesitated. She'd been trying to maintain professional distance to treat this situation like any other job despite its obvious complications. But Ryan had an unsettling ability to see through her carefully constructed walls. "I'm not used to being confined," she admitted. "I know I can leave the building, but there's always someone watching, always security nearby. It feels like being in a very nice prison." "I understand that," Ryan said quietly, "and I'm sorry. But the situation hasn't resolved itself yet." "Have you found the traitor?" Emily asked, then immediately wished she hadn't. That question probably fell into the category of things she wasn't supposed to ask. But Ryan didn't deflect. "We've narrowed it down to 3 possibilities. People I've worked with for years, people I trusted." His jaw tightened. "That's the part that makes this difficult. Knowing someone close to me decided I was worth more gone than alive." There was genuine hurt beneath his controlled exterior, and Emily felt an unexpected surge of sympathy. She knew what betrayal felt like. Her ex-boyfriend had left when her father got sick, unable to handle the stress and the medical bills and Emily's grief. That abandonment had taught her that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. "What happens when you figure out who it is?" Emily asked, not sure she wanted to know the answer. "We handle it," Vincent said gruffly. "That's all you need to know." "Vincent's right," Ryan agreed. "The less you know about certain aspects of this situation, the better. But I promise you, Emily, once we've dealt with the threat, you're free to return to your life." Did she even want to return to her life? The question surprised Emily with its sudden appearance in her mind. 3 weeks ago, the answer would have been an unqualified yes. But now, after seeing how the other half lived, after discovering she had skills and intelligence that could be valued beyond carrying plates and remembering drink orders, "Let's focus on the quarterly reports," Diana interjected smoothly, sensing the conversation was drifting into uncomfortable territory. "Emily, walk us through what you found." The meeting lasted 2 hours. Emily presented her analysis, fielded questions, and found herself actually enjoying the intellectual challenge of it. Diana was impressed. Emily could tell by the way she asked follow-up questions and made notes. Even Vincent, who'd been suspicious of her at first, had warmed up over the weeks, occasionally offering a gruff, "good work," when she identified something important. Ryan mostly listened, but Emily felt his attention on her throughout the meeting. It was unnerving and oddly flattering at the same time, the way he focused completely when she spoke, as if her words were the only thing that mattered in that moment. After the meeting ended, Diana and Vincent left to handle other business. Emily gathered her materials, preparing to return to her apartment office, but Ryan's voice stopped her. "Emily, stay for a moment." She turned back, finding him still by the windows, looking out over the city. The gray morning light cast shadows across his face, highlighting the strong line of his jaw and the weariness he tried to hide. Yes? Emily prompted when he didn't immediately speak. You've been here 3 weeks, Ryan said, still not looking at her. You've worked hard, asked minimal questions, adapted to a situation that most people couldn't handle. I appreciate that. You're paying me well and keeping me safe, Emily replied. It's not exactly a hardship, isn't it? Now Ryan turned to face her, and the intensity in his dark eyes made her breath catch. You gave up your freedom, your independence, your normal life. You're living in isolation, working for a man you barely know, surrounded by a world you never asked to be part of. That requires strength most people don't have. Emily shifted uncomfortably under his scrutiny. I'm just doing what I need to do to survive. No, Ryan said softly, moving closer. You're doing much more than that. You're thriving. Diana tells me you're the best analyst she's worked with in years. Vincent says you have better instincts about people than half his security team. You're not just surviving, Emily. You're discovering who you really are. The words hit harder than Emily expected. Was he right? Had these 3 weeks shown her a version of herself she'd never known existed? The Emily who'd worked at the Velvet Room had been beaten down by life, just trying to get through each day. This Emily, the one wearing designer clothes and analyzing financial reports and living 40 floors above the city, felt different, stronger, more capable. I don't know who I am anymore, Emily admitted quietly. Everything changed so fast. Change isn't always bad, Ryan said. He was close enough now that Emily could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive that made her more aware of him than she wanted to be. Sometimes it shows us possibilities we never considered. Is that what happened to you? Emily asked, finding courage from somewhere. Did circumstances change you into what you are now? Ryan's expression flickered, surprise, then something darker. Yes, I wasn't always this person. I had different dreams once, different plans. But life has a way of making choices for us, and we either adapt or we don't survive. What were your dreams? Emily found herself genuinely curious about this complicated man who'd inserted himself into her life so completely. Architecture, Ryan said, and a ghost of a smile crossed his face. I wanted to design buildings, create spaces where people could live and work and feel safe. I went to Columbia for 2 years, studying design and structural engineering. What happened? My father was taken from us, Ryan said simply, and my brother stepped up to run the family businesses. But Marcus was too trusting, too willing to see the best in people. That weakness got him hurt badly 7 years ago. He survived, but he couldn't continue in the role. So I came home, left school, took over responsibilities I never wanted. I've been doing it ever since. Emily heard the weight of regret in his voice, the ghost of the person he might have been. Do you ever wish you could go back, choose differently? Every day, Ryan admitted. But wishing doesn't change reality. I made my choice. I built this empire, protected my family's legacy, kept the people who depend on me safe. That has to be enough. They stood in silence for a moment, and Emily realized how little distance remained between them. She could see the flecks of lighter brown in his dark eyes, could count the faint lines at the corners that suggested he smiled more than his serious demeanor usually showed. Emily, Ryan said, his voice lower now, almost uncertain, an unfamiliar quality coming from someone usually so controlled. I need to tell you something. Her heart rate picked up. What? These past 3 weeks, having you here, working with you, talking to you. He paused, seeming to struggle with words. You've reminded me that there's more to life than business and strategy and managing threats. You see things differently. You question things I take for granted. You make me think about possibilities I'd stopped considering. Ryan, Emily started, not sure where this was going, but feeling the conversation shift into dangerous territory. I'm not saying this to make you uncomfortable, Ryan continued. I'm saying it because you deserve honesty. You've been honest with me about your fears, your frustrations, your uncertainty. I owe you the same courtesy. What are you trying to say? Emily asked, though part of her already knew and wasn't sure she was ready to hear it. I'm saying that keeping you safe has become about more than honoring a debt, Ryan said quietly. I'm saying that when I see you every day, when we talk about business or life or nothing at all, I feel something I haven't felt in years, something I didn't think I was capable of feeling anymore. Emily's mouth went dry. This was a complication she definitely didn't need. Getting emotionally involved with Ryan Moretti would be beyond foolish. It would be potentially self-destructive. He was dangerous, complex, living a life that existed in moral gray areas she'd spent years trying to avoid. But her treacherous heart didn't seem to care about any of that. Because somewhere over the past 3 weeks, she'd started looking forward to their morning meetings and their occasional late-night conversations when neither of them could sleep. She'd started noticing the way his rare smiles transformed his face, the intelligence in his eyes when he talked about something he cared about, the gentleness in his hands when he'd helped her once with a paper cut that had bled more than expected. "This is a bad idea," Emily whispered, but she didn't step back. "Probably the worst," Ryan agreed. "You should walk away right now. Go back to your apartment, maintain professional distance, wait for this situation to resolve so you can return to your real life." "That's the smart choice," Emily said. "It is." Neither of them moved. Emily started, but whatever she was going to say was interrupted by the conference room door opening abruptly. Vincent stood there, his expression grim. "Boss, we have a problem. Marco just called. There's been an incident at the Red Hook warehouse." The moment shattered. Ryan's demeanor shifted instantly from uncertain to commanding, all traces of vulnerability vanishing behind his professional mask. "What kind of incident?" "Fire. Authorities are calling it suspicious. Someone's making a move." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Get the car ready. I want to see the damage personally." He glanced at Emily. "This conversation isn't over." Then he was gone, Vincent following, leaving Emily alone in the conference room with her heart pounding and her mind racing. What had just happened? Had Ryan Moretti, dangerous, complicated, powerful Ryan Moretti, just admitted he had feelings for her? And more importantly, why hadn't she immediately shut that down? "Because you have feelings for him too," a traitorous voice in her head whispered. Because somewhere between being terrified of him and working alongside him and learning who he really is beneath the intimidating exterior, you started caring about him. This was bad. This was potentially disastrous. Emily had worked so hard to rebuild her life after her father's passing, to create stability and safety and predictability. Getting emotionally entangled with someone like Ryan threatened all of that. But as Emily returned to her apartment and tried to focus on work, she couldn't stop replaying their conversation. The vulnerability in Ryan's voice, the way he'd looked at her like she was something precious and unexpected, the admission that she'd reminded him there was more to life than the empire he'd built. Her phone buzzed. A message from Diana. "Ryan will be out for the rest of the day. He asked me to make sure you have everything you need." Emily stared at the message, then typed back, "I'm fine, thank you." But she wasn't fine. She was confused and conflicted and feeling things she had no business feeling for a man whose world was so different from everything she'd known. The afternoon dragged. Emily tried to work but couldn't concentrate. She made lunch but barely tasted it. She stood at the window watching the city below, wondering where Ryan was and if he was safe, and hating herself for caring. Evening came. Emily had just decided to order dinner when there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Ryan standing there, and her heart did that annoying flutter thing it had started doing whenever she saw him. He looked exhausted, tie loosened, shirt sleeves rolled up, soot smudges on his collar suggesting he'd been at the fire scene personally, but his eyes were alert as they met hers. "Can I come in?" he asked. Emily stepped aside, letting him enter. The apartment suddenly felt smaller with his presence filling it. He moved to the window she'd been standing at earlier, looking out at the darkness, punctuated by city lights. "The warehouse was deliberately set," Ryan said without preamble. "Professional job. Someone wanted to send a message." "What kind of message?" Emily asked, even though she suspected she shouldn't. "That they're still out there, still planning, still dangerous." Ryan turned to face her. "The investigation is taking longer than I hoped. I know you're frustrated with the limitations on your freedom, but I need you to be patient a little longer." "I can be patient," Emily said quietly. "That's not what's bothering me." "Then what is?" Emily took a deep breath. This conversation needed to happen, even though every instinct told her to avoid it. "What you said this morning, about feeling something. We can't do this, Ryan. Whatever this is, it's a bad idea for about 100 different reasons." "Name 3, Ryan challenged, moving closer. "You're my boss," Emily started. "Technically, you work for Moretti Enterprises, not me, personally. You're dangerous. To my enemies. Never to you. We're from completely different worlds. So what?" Ryan was close now. Close enough that Emily had to tilt her head back slightly to maintain eye contact. "Emily, I've spent years building walls around myself, keeping everyone at a distance because trust is a weakness in my world. But you walked through those walls without even trying. You see me. Not the reputation, not the empire, not the person everyone else sees. You see the man I actually am. And who are you? Emily whispered. Someone who's tired of being alone, Ryan said simply. Someone who wants to believe that maybe, despite everything, there's still room in my life for something real. Someone who looks at you and sees possibilities I thought I'd lost forever. Emily's resolve was crumbling. She should maintain professional distance. She should protect herself from the inevitable complications. She should remember that in a few weeks or months, this situation would end, and she'd return to her normal life, and Ryan would remain in his world of power and danger. But she didn't want to be sensible right now. She wanted to be brave, even if brave meant doing something potentially foolish. Ryan, she said softly, if we do this, if we acknowledge that there's something between us, everything gets more complicated. Everything's already complicated, Ryan pointed out. His hand reached up, fingers gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch sent electricity through Emily's nervous system. The question is whether the complication is worth it. Is it? Emily asked, her voice barely audible. Instead of answering with words, Ryan closed the remaining distance between them. His hand cupped her face with surprising gentleness, his thumb tracing her cheekbone as his dark eyes searched hers for permission. Emily gave it by rising on her toes and closing the final gap. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, questioning, as if they were both afraid this fragile thing between them might shatter under too much pressure. But then Emily's hands found their way to Ryan's shoulders and his arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer, and the kiss deepened into something more urgent, more real. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder, Emily rested her forehead against Ryan's chest and felt his heart beating as rapidly as her own. This is crazy, she murmured. Completely insane, Ryan agreed, his voice rough, his arms tightened around her. But maybe crazy is exactly what we both need. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other in the growing darkness, the city lights twinkling outside like distant stars. Emily knew this changed everything. She knew there would be consequences and complications and probably heartbreak down the road. But right now, in Ryan's arms, feeling more alive than she had in years, Emily couldn't bring herself to care about the future. For once in her carefully controlled life, she was going to embrace the present and see where it led, even if it led somewhere dangerous. Especially if it led somewhere dangerous. Because Emily Carter was discovering that the woman she'd become over these past 3 weeks wasn't content with safe anymore. She wanted real. She wanted passionate. She wanted to feel something beyond the numbness that had defined her life for so long. And Ryan Moretti, for all his complications and contradictions, made her feel more than she'd ever thought possible. Stay tonight, Emily whispered. Just stay. Ryan pulled back enough to look at her face, his expression serious. Are you sure? No, Emily admitted. But I don't want to be alone. And I don't think you do either. A slow smile crossed Ryan's face, the genuine kind that made him look younger, less burdened. I'll stay. They moved to the couch and Ryan pulled Emily against his side. She fit there perfectly, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. They talked quietly about inconsequential things, favorite movies, childhood memories, dreams they'd both given up on. It was the kind of conversation Emily hadn't had with anyone in years, intimate and honest and unexpectedly comfortable. Somewhere around midnight, Emily drifted off to sleep, feeling safer than she had since this whole situation began. Ryan stayed awake longer, watching her sleep, his expression shifting between wonder and concern, and something that looked almost like fear. Because Ryan Moretti knew what Emily didn't yet understand, that what was growing between them was more dangerous than any business rival or betrayer. It was the kind of connection that could destroy them both if they weren't careful. But looking at Emily, brave, brilliant, beautiful Emily who'd saved his life and challenged his assumptions and made him feel human again, Ryan realized he didn't care about the danger. Some things were worth the risk. Some people were worth fighting for. And Emily Carter had somehow become the most important person in his world, whether she understood that yet or not. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm, and inside the 38th floor apartment, two people from different worlds found something unexpected in each other's arms. Hope. The call came at 4:47 a.m. Emily woke to Ryan's phone vibrating insistently on the coffee table, his body tensing instantly beside her. They'd fallen asleep on the couch, still dressed, wrapped in each other's arms like teenagers afraid to take things too far too fast. Ryan grabbed the phone, his voice alert, despite the early hour. Talk to me. Emily sat up, watching his expression shift from sleepy contentment to hard focus in seconds. Whatever news he was receiving wasn't good. When? Ryan asked sharply. How many? A pause. No, don't move until I get there. 20 minutes. He ended the call and was on his feet immediately, straightening his clothes with efficient movements. I have to go. There's been a development. What kind of development? Emily asked, fear crystallizing in her chest. Ryan hesitated, clearly debating how much to tell her. We found the traitor. Or rather, he revealed himself. There's going to be a meeting tonight, him and whoever he's working with. A final confrontation. That's dangerous, Emily said, standing to face him. What if it's a trap? It probably is, Ryan admitted. But it's also our best chance to end this. Once we know who's behind everything, we can neutralize the threat and you can go back to your life. Go back to her life. The phrase that should have brought relief instead felt like a weight. Because Emily's life had fundamentally changed over the past 3 weeks, and especially over the past few hours. Going back meant leaving Ryan, returning to the emptiness she'd been living in before that red dot changed everything. I want to come with you, Emily said suddenly. Absolutely not. Ryan's response was immediate and firm. This isn't your world, Emily. I won't put you in that kind of situation. You put me in this situation the moment I saved your life, Emily countered. Everything that's happened since then, living here, working for you, whatever this is between us, it's all connected. I'm already involved. Being involved and being present at a dangerous confrontation are two very different things. Ryan, no. He cupped her face in his hands, his dark eyes intense. I need to know you're safe. That's non-negotiable. Vincent will stay here with you. The building's secure. Nothing will happen to you. Emily wanted to argue, but she could see the fear beneath his controlled exterior. He was genuinely worried about her, and that concern was touching even as it frustrated her. Promise me you'll be careful, she whispered. I promise. Ryan kissed her forehead, then her lips. A brief, fierce kiss that felt like both a promise and a goodbye. I'll be back before you know it. Then he was gone, and Emily was left standing in her apartment as dawn began breaking over Manhattan, wondering if she'd just seen Ryan Moretti for the last time. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Vincent arrived within minutes of Ryan's departure, positioning himself by the door like a sentinel. He didn't offer much conversation, but his presence was oddly comforting. Diana called around noon with instructions. Emily should stay in the apartment, avoid the windows, keep her phone charged. The careful neutrality in Diana's voice suggested she knew more than she was saying. Is Ryan going to be okay? Emily asked directly. Mr. Moretti has handled difficult situations before, Diana replied, which wasn't really an answer. Try not to worry. But Emily couldn't help worrying. She paced the apartment, unable to focus on work or television or anything else. Her mind kept conjuring worst-case scenarios. Ryan walking into an ambush, getting hurt, not coming back. When had he become so important to her? How had this complicated, dangerous man worked his way past all her defenses in just 3 weeks? Evening came. The sky darkened, and the city lights flickered to life below. Emily stood at the window despite Diana's warning, watching the urban landscape and wondering where Ryan was right now. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Brooklyn Docks. Warehouse 7. If you want to understand who Ryan Moretti really is, come alone. Emily's heart stopped. This was clearly a trap. Obviously a manipulation. She should delete it immediately and tell Vincent. But what if it wasn't? What if Ryan was walking into something worse than he anticipated and needed help? She looked at Vincent, who had his back to her while speaking quietly into his phone. The apartment door was 10 feet away. The elevator required a key card, but Emily had been given one for emergencies. This felt like an emergency. Before she could talk herself out of it, Emily grabbed her coat and key card and slipped out the door. She heard Vincent shout behind her, but she was already in the elevator, pressing the button for the parking garage. Her hands shook as she called a car service. This was insane. This was potentially self-destructive. But the thought of Ryan facing danger while she sat safely in her apartment made her feel physically ill. The drive to Brooklyn took 40 minutes through evening traffic. Emily spent the entire time second-guessing her decision, but she didn't turn back. The docks emerged from the urban landscape, industrial, isolated, dangerous in their emptiness. Warehouse 7 loomed ahead, its windows dark, its exterior weather-worn and abandoned-looking. Emily's driver gave her a concerned look. You sure about this, miss? Doesn't look safe. I'm meeting someone, Emily lied. I'll be fine. She wasn't fine. She was terrified, but she walked toward the warehouse anyway, her phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline. The door was unlocked. Inside, the space was vast and dim, lit only by grimy windows letting in ambient city light. Emily's footsteps echoed on concrete floors. "Hello?" she called, her voice sounding small in the cavernous space. Movement in the shadows. Emily's breath caught as figures emerged. Several men, unfamiliar faces moving with predatory purpose. And behind them, someone she did recognize. Marcus, the young nervous man from that first night at the restaurant. "Ms. Carter," Marcus said, his previous fear replaced with cold confidence. "Thank you for coming. You've made this much easier." Understanding crashed over Emily like ice water. The text, the location, this had nothing to do with helping Ryan. This was about using her against him. "Where's Ryan?" Emily demanded, trying to sound braver than she felt. "On his way," Marcus replied. "We sent him a similar message, that you'd come here alone and needed help. He'll arrive shortly, probably with Vincent and half his security team, and when he does, we'll be waiting." "You're the traitor," Emily said, the pieces falling into place. "You've been working against him from the beginning." "Working for my own interests," Marcus corrected. "Ryan Moretti has had control for too long. Time for new leadership. And you, Miss Carter, are the perfect bait. He's developed quite an attachment to you. It's almost touching." Emily's mind raced, looking for options. She'd walked straight into their trap, and now Ryan was coming to save her, which was exactly what they wanted. Her phone buzzed. Ryan calling. Marcus gestured for her to answer, a weapon now visible in his hand. "Put it on speaker," he instructed. Emily answered with shaking hands. "Ryan? Emily, where are you?" Ryan's voice was tight with controlled panic. "Vincent said you left? Tell me where you are." "I'm sorry," Emily whispered. "I got a text. I thought you needed help. I'm at the Brooklyn Docks, Warehouse 7. Stay there, don't move, I'm coming." "Ryan, it's a trap," Emily started, but Marcus ended the call. "Perfect," Marcus said with satisfaction. "Now, we wait." 20 minutes felt like hours. Emily sat on the cold concrete floor surrounded by men with weapons, mentally cursing her own impulsiveness. She'd been trying to help and instead had created exactly the situation Ryan had been trying to prevent. Then she heard vehicles outside, doors opening, footsteps approaching. Ryan entered the warehouse with Vincent and 3 others moving cautiously. His eyes found Emily immediately, and the relief in his expression was quickly replaced by cold anger as he assessed the situation. "Let her go, Marcus," Ryan said, his voice deadly calm. "This is between us." "Actually, it's much bigger than us," Marcus replied. "This is about the future of the organization. You've grown soft, Ryan. Sentimental. That weakness ends tonight. You think taking me out will give you control?" Ryan's laugh was harsh. "You're working with the Castellanos. They'll eliminate you the moment I'm gone." "We have an arrangement," Marcus insisted, but Emily heard doubt creeping into his voice. "You have a delusion," Ryan corrected. "They're using you to destabilize my operations. Once that's accomplished, you're expendable." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Emily could feel the tension building, weapons being positioned, everyone calculating their next move. Then Emily noticed something, a red dot, small and trembling on Marcus's chest, just like that first night at the restaurant. "Marcus!" Emily shouted. "Move!" But this time she wasn't close enough to push him. This time she could only watch as Marcus looked down, saw the laser sight, and his expression shifted from confidence to terror. The shot came from outside, a window shattering, Marcus dropping to the ground. Chaos erupted instantly. Ryan's security moved to protect him, hauling him toward cover. The other men scattered, shouting, trying to locate the shooter. Emily pressed herself against a concrete pillar, her heart hammering. This was real violence, real danger, nothing like the organized chaos of the restaurant. This was survival. Vincent appeared beside her, his hand gripping her arm. "Stay low. We're getting you out." More shots. Return fire. The warehouse became a war zone of sound and movement. Emily couldn't track what was happening, just knew that Vincent was pulling her toward a side exit, that Ryan was somewhere in this chaos, that everything had gone horribly wrong. They emerged into cold night air. Vincent pushed Emily toward an armored vehicle. "Get in. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone but me or Ryan." Then he was gone, back into the warehouse. Emily sat in the vehicle, shaking uncontrollably, listening to sounds she couldn't identify and praying everyone would be okay. Minutes passed. The sounds decreased, then stopped entirely. The warehouse door opened. Ryan emerged, his suit torn, blood on his shirt, though Emily couldn't tell if it was his. He looked exhausted and furious, and relieved all at once. He pulled open the vehicle door. "Are you hurt?" "No. Are you?" "Not seriously." Ryan climbed in beside her, his hand immediately checking her over as if needing physical confirmation she was unharmed. "Emily, what were you thinking? Coming here alone?" "I thought you needed help," Emily said, tears suddenly streaming down her face, adrenaline crash hitting hard. The text said, "I thought." "I know." Ryan pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her tightly. "I know. But you could have been hurt. You could have been taken from me. Do you understand how that felt?" Emily sobbed against his chest, the fear and stress of the past hours finally overwhelming her. Ryan held her, his hand stroking her hair, whispering reassurances in a gentle voice she'd never heard him use before. Eventually, she calmed enough to ask, "What happened in there? Is it over?" "Marcus is gone," Ryan said quietly. Taken out by his own partners, the Castellanos decided he was more useful as a message than an ally. The others scattered. "Vincent's team is handling cleanup." "So it's over?" Emily asked, hope and dread mixing in her voice. Ryan pulled back to look at her face, his expression complicated. "The immediate threat is over. But Emily, you need to understand something. This is my life. Danger, confrontations, people making moves for power. It never really ends. It just changes form." "I know," Emily whispered. "Do you?" Ryan's dark eyes searched hers. "Because after tonight you can't pretend you don't understand what my world involves. You saw it. You were in it. And if you stay, if we continue whatever this is between us, you'll always be connected to this reality." Emily took a shaky breath. "Are you asking me to make a choice?" "I'm asking you to be honest with yourself about what you can handle," Ryan said gently. "I want you in my life, Emily, more than I've wanted anything in years, but I won't trap you in a world that destroys you." Emily looked at this complicated, dangerous, surprisingly gentle man who'd changed her life completely. She thought about her old apartment in Queens, her waitressing job, her safe but empty existence. Then she thought about the past 3 weeks, feeling alive, challenged, valued, feeling something real for the first time since her father passed. "I'm scared," Emily admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you smart. But I'm not leaving." Emily took his face in her hands. "Whatever this is, whatever comes next, I choose this, I choose you." Ryan's expression cracked, vulnerability showing through. "You're sure?" "No," Emily said honestly. "But I'm sure I'd regret walking away more than I'd regret staying." Ryan kissed her then, desperate and relieved and fierce, and Emily kissed him back, knowing she was choosing chaos over safety, danger over predictability, life over mere existence. The storm had broken, but somehow, they'd both survived it. Now they just had to figure out what came next. 3 days after the warehouse, Emily stood in the office of FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen, wondering how her life had managed to get even more complicated. "Ms. Carter," Agent Chen said, sliding a folder across the desk. "We've been investigating Ryan Moretti's operations for 2 years, and now you're in a unique position to help us." Emily's stomach dropped. She'd known this was coming. Authorities had questioned everyone involved in the warehouse incident, but she hadn't expected this. "Help you how?" Emily asked carefully. "By providing information about Moretti Enterprises' operations, internal communications, financial records, business meetings. You have access that we don't." Agent Chen leaned forward, her expression earnest. "I know this is difficult, but Ryan Moretti isn't who you think he is." "Then who is he?" Emily challenged. Agent Chen opened the folder, revealing photographs and documents. "He's someone who operates businesses that, while technically legal, facilitate activities that aren't. Money movement, import operations with questionable manifests, construction projects that seem designed more for influence than profit." Emily had seen those same irregularities in the reports she'd analyzed. She'd noted them, questioned them internally, but never voiced her concerns aloud. "We can offer you protection," Agent Chen continued. "Witness protection if necessary. A fresh start, away from all of this. You'd be safe, and you'd be doing the right thing." The right thing. Emily had spent 3 weeks learning that right and wrong weren't as clear-cut as she'd once believed. Ryan operated in gray areas, yes, but he also protected people, employed hundreds, maintained a code of honor that mattered in his world. What happens to Ryan if I cooperate? Emily asked. That depends on what information you provide. But realistically, Ms. Carter, he'd face serious legal consequences. Emily looked at the photographs of Ryan, surveillance shots, candid images, his face serious and guarded in all of them. 3 days ago, she'd seen that face soften as he held her after the warehouse, as he'd whispered that she mattered more than anything. I need time to think, Emily said. Don't take too long, Agent Chen warned. The deeper you get into Moretti's world, the harder it becomes to leave. Eventually, you won't have a choice. Emily returned to the apartment in a daze. Diana was waiting, her usually composed expression troubled. Ryan wants to see you, Diana said. He's upstairs. Emily took the elevator to the penthouse, her mind churning. Agent Chen's offer represented everything she should want: safety, a clean break, a return to normalcy. But the thought of betraying Ryan, of being responsible for destroying him, made her physically ill. She found him on the terrace, despite the November cold. He wore a heavy coat, hands in his pockets, staring out at Central Park's bare trees and the city beyond. You spoke with the FBI, Ryan said without turning around. It wasn't a question. How did you know? Because it's what they do. They find leverage and they use it. Now Ryan turned to face her and his expression was carefully neutral. What did they offer you? Protection? A fresh start. My life back. Emily moved to stand beside him. They want me to provide information about your businesses. And? Ryan's voice was controlled, but Emily heard the tension underneath. And I told them I needed time to think. Something flickered in Ryan's eyes. Relief, quickly suppressed. You should take their offer, Emily. The words hit like a slap. What? This isn't your world, it never was. You stumbled into it trying to save someone and you've been trapped here ever since. Ryan's jaw tightened. The warehouse showed you what my life really involves. Violence, danger, moral compromises. You deserve better than that. Don't tell me what I deserve, Emily said, anger rising. I'm capable of making my own choices. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, you're choosing chaos over peace, danger over safety, a complicated man over a normal life. Ryan moved closer, his dark eyes intense. I'm giving you permission to walk away, Emily. Take the FBI's deal. Start over somewhere safe. Forget you ever met me. Is that what you want? Emily demanded. For me to leave? Ryan was silent for a long moment, his expression warring between what he wanted and what he thought was right. What I want doesn't matter. What matters is you getting your life back. My life wasn't worth getting back. The words burst out before Emily could stop them. I was surviving, Ryan. Just existing, day to day, with no purpose beyond paying bills and avoiding memories. Then you happened and suddenly I was awake again. Alive. Mattering to someone. Tears burned in her eyes. Don't you understand? You didn't trap me here. You saved me. Ryan's controlled exterior cracked. Emily, I know who you are, Emily continued fiercely. I see the gray areas, the compromises, the things you do that aren't entirely legal. But I also see the man who protects his people, who keeps his word, who looks at me like I'm the most important person in his world. That man is worth staying for. Even if staying means living with constant uncertainty, never knowing if another threat will emerge. Ryan's hand cupped her face. I can't guarantee your safety. I can't promise you a normal life. I don't want normal anymore, Emily said. I want real. I want you. Even with all the complications and danger and moral ambiguity. I choose this, Ryan. I choose us. Ryan pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met or the most reckless. Probably both, Emily admitted, her face pressed against his chest. They stood together in the cold, holding each other as the city sprawled beneath them. Emily knew this decision would change everything. She'd essentially chosen Ryan over cooperation with authorities, which came with its own set of consequences. What happens now? Emily asked quietly. Now we figure out how to build something real in a very complicated world, Ryan replied. I'll protect you from external threats. But Emily, you need to understand. The FBI won't stop. They'll keep watching, keep looking for leverage. Let them watch, Emily said. They won't find anything because I'm not going to betray you. Ryan pulled back to look at her face, his expression raw with emotion he usually kept hidden. I love you. I didn't plan to. I didn't want to risk caring about anyone this much. But somewhere between you saving my life and challenging everything I thought I knew about myself, you became essential. Emily's breath caught. I love you too. Even though it's crazy and probably destructive and definitely not what I planned, Ryan smiled. That rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. The best things never are. He kissed her then, gentle and deep and full of promises they'd both try to keep, despite impossible odds. 6 months later, Emily stood in a newly renovated office space in Lower Manhattan, overseeing the final details. The sign outside read, Moretti Security Consulting, providing strategic risk assessment and protection services. It was Ryan's idea, taking Emily's unique perspective and analytical skills and building something legitimate around them. She'd spent months learning the security industry, obtaining certifications, building a reputation separate from but connected to Ryan's empire. The business was real, the clients genuine, and if some of those clients happened to be people Ryan wanted to help or protect or keep close, well, that was just good networking. Looks good, Diana said, appearing beside Emily with her ever-present tablet. First official client meeting is in an hour. I'm ready, Emily said, and she was. She'd transformed from a struggling waitress to a legitimate businesswoman, from someone who avoided complications to someone who navigated them with skill. Ryan appeared in the doorway, and Emily's heart still did that ridiculous flutter after 6 months together. He wore a sharp suit and that slight smile he reserved specifically for her. Proud of you, he said simply. Couldn't have done it without you, Emily replied. You could have, Ryan corrected. You just didn't have to. That was their relationship in a nutshell. Two people who could survive independently, but chose to build something together. It wasn't perfect. The FBI still watched. Threats still emerged periodically. Ryan's world still involved moral complexities Emily was learning to navigate. But they faced it together. Partners in business and life, building an empire that existed somewhere between Ryan's gray area operations and Emily's desire for legitimacy. That evening, they stood in Ryan's penthouse, their penthouse now, Emily having officially moved in last month. The city sparkled below them, millions of lives intersecting in patterns too complex to fully understand. Any regrets? Ryan asked, his arm around Emily's waist. Just one, Emily said, then smiled at his concerned expression. That I didn't meet you sooner. Ryan laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded. We met exactly when we were supposed to. Any earlier and I wouldn't have been ready for you. And now? Now I can't imagine my life without you in it. Emily turned in his arms, rising on her toes to kiss him. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. Inside, two people who should never have worked together had built something real and lasting from impossible circumstances. The red dot that had started everything had become a symbol, not of danger, but of change. Of the moment when Emily Carter stopped merely surviving and started truly living. She'd saved Ryan Moretti's life that night at the Velvet Room, but in the process, he'd saved hers too. And that, Emily thought as Ryan held her close and whispered promises against her hair, was worth every complication, every risk, every uncertain moment. Some debts weren't meant to be repaid. Some were meant to be honored through building something beautiful together. This was theirs. Imperfect, complicated, real. And Emily wouldn't change a single thing. Epilogue. 2 years later, Emily stood at a podium addressing a room full of business owners and security professionals. Her company had grown beyond anything she'd imagined. Legitimate, respected, successful. Ryan sat in the front row, pride evident in his expression. Beside him sat Vincent, now head of their combined security operations. Diana managed the administrative side, keeping everything running smoothly. They'd built something together, an empire that existed in the light rather than shadows. Ryan had slowly transitioned his questionable operations into legitimate enterprises, with Emily's influence pushing him toward the man he'd once wanted to be. It wasn't perfect. Old associates sometimes resurfaced. The FBI still watched, though with decreasing interest as the evidence of wrongdoing became harder to find. Threats emerged and were handled, but they handled everything together. That night, over dinner in a restaurant that felt worlds away from the Velvet Room, Ryan took Emily's hand. I have a question, he said, his usual confidence touched with nervousness. Emily's heart skipped. Yes? Ryan smiled, pulling a small box from his pocket. You saved my life once. Will you spend the rest of it with me? The diamond caught the candlelight as Emily's eyes filled with happy tears. Yes. Absolutely yes. As Ryan slipped the ring onto her finger, Emily thought about that frightened waitress who'd seen a red dot and acted without thinking. She'd saved a man's life and in the process, found her own. Sometimes the bravest thing you could do was take a chance on something, or someone, complicated. Sometimes love meant choosing chaos over safety, and sometimes, despite impossible odds, everything worked out exactly as it was meant to. Emily Carter had learned all those lessons. And she'd learned one more. The best stories don't start with once upon a time. They start with a split-second decision that changes everything.